Hi all. I'm just going to introduce the Empathy Spectrum workshop to you today. Hopefully that will give us a bit more time on Tuesday so we can have longer discussions and things, and hopefully this will give you things to think about over the weekend. Hi, I'm Chantal. I'm really looking forward to working with all of you on Tuesday and seeing what we all get from the workshop. I'm currently a student doing my master's in sustainable design also at Brighton Uni. So very much staring down the barrel of an upcoming PhD proposal. I'm sure a few of you are feeling the same way too. I'm also disabled and use a mobility scooter to get around and crutches to do sort of small distances. Any questions are welcome and helpful. I can't stress enough how invested I am in the learning from this process. There's not just something that I'm teaching as part of a syllabus or an idea that came to me. This is a process that I really believe can change the world for intersectional communities like mine. And one day I'd like to strike the word activist off of my bio and it just be an accepted part of our practice as designers. To be using ground up research to inform our work, but we're not there yet. So for this reason, I suppose this workshop and the model I designed it from is my personal form of protest. So welcome to the revolution, guys. That being said, it's also the most important that you feel comfortable to ask questions and do not feel concerned about language and things like that. This is a safe space where you can feel free to ask difficult questions, accidentally use outdated terminology or whatever. I will just answer your questions if I can and correct your missed words and move on. So this is very much a space for you to learn and discuss freely. Just briefly about the project, the project aim. So Tuesday morning, we'll be exploring the concept of designing an imperfect resolution and using empathy as a design tool. Aims is to provide confidence, to improve your confidence as designers working with intersectional issues such as disability. And the process, we'll be doing a series of tasks throughout the day, discussing findings with each other and getting feedback. And we're kind of tight on time, but hopefully we'll make it work. It'll be from 10 in the morning till 1 p.m. So yeah, try and all be on time. That would be great. Okay. So as I mentioned before about imperfect resolutions, so what do I mean by an imperfect resolution? Here's a great quote by Voltaire. So perfection is the enemy of good. And the key word there for me about imperfect resolutions is the imperfect. One of the aims of this workshop is to push back against the inertia of perfection seeking when dealing with complex problems like disability, where there is no one-size-fits-all solution. And in fact, trying to find one reinforces the idea that the issues themselves are impossible to design for. So the aim of this workshop is to help encourage you to see complexity as opportunity for multiple solutions. And by coupling those with transparency and communication, we can begin to tackle some of the stickiest, most complex problems with emergent and dynamic new design. That being said, when I say imperfect, of course, I do not mean bad. Here is a fantastic example of some terrible design. I think we can all agree on that. Who knows what people were thinking when they designed this. I know this example is pretty sensational. And of course, we can find anything if we Google hard enough. So here's another example of bad design, or more to the point, design without empathy. So this is actually my local Sainsbury's. As a disabled woman with severe mobility issues, this is the entrance I have to use to get into my Sainsbury's. I have to go through this kind of dark car park. I use the mobility scooter to get around, as I said before, and it feels very unsafe doing this. The maximum speed I have is 4 miles per hour. And I'm also, because I'm seated about the height of a kind of 9-year-old child, you can see like I'm just near the bonnets really, so I'm not very visible either. That on top of it is just, you know, dark, dingy, wet. There's been a lot of antisocial behaviour in this car park, and a lot of kind of there's been sexual attacks. Women have been, you know, attacked, and yeah, it's just an awful kind of car park to be in. I think I chose this example because I feel like one of the aspects that we're going to be talking about later is commonality. And I think we can all appreciate the feeling of unsafeness in one of these horrible kind of car parks. And actually, as a disabled woman, I'm probably, you know, even more vulnerable than an able-bodied person, and this in turn makes it even more dangerous for me. And so the idea that and this is the fantastic lift. That's literally how close my face is to the actual lift. So here I'm coming out of the wondrous lift, and I'm greeted with this joyous bit of design, nice brutalist design, nice bit of thing there around the back. Yeah, so, you know, this is not the normal entrance that other people get, able-bodied people get when they go to Sainsbury's or a supermarket. They get lovely, well lit, they get posters, they get all sorts of stuff. Yeah, so this is my example of bad design, and more importantly, designing without empathy. They ticked all the boxes. There's step-free access to the Sainsbury's, but they forgot to empathize with the people who are actually going to be using it. So, on to my next slide. A few weeks ago, a very astute student, asked me this question about how do we handle savior complex issue? And I just felt like it was a really good question. So I've introduced it to my intro now, because I think it's a really important question to think about. Here is my imperfect resolution to the issue of abled saviorism. Of course, savior complex absolutely exists, and it's a complicated and sticky issue to deal with. Something that anyone from a dominant culture needs to be keenly aware of when dealing with underrepresented communities. But there's a very broad line between someone working within diversity and empathy to a person with savior complex. Here's just a little picture of Kira Allen, who's a wonderful actress, and she's the first wheelchair user action star in a film called Run. If you haven't seen it, watch it. It's really good. I think it's on Netflix. I think the most important way to keep that kind of thing in line is by appreciating and championing people's stories as fact and not anecdotal evidence. The best way I can describe this is if we imagine the research process like a court of law. The designer is the judge, and the cultural and social issue is the party being prosecuted. Their lawyers are the people who perpetrated the issues, defending themselves. Often from the underrepresented communities, people from the underrepresented communities are treated like witnesses or victims to a crime, but in reality, they're the experts and they should be treated as such. Their word should be the final word on the matter, and it's a value judgment of the designer if they're going to take the expertise into their work. And if the designer chooses to not value that testimony, the validity of the expertise does not diminish. In this case, but the work that the designer produces does. The more a designer ignores the expert testimony, the more inaccurate their work will be. So to sum up, abled saviorism, let's avoid it by simply intersectional voices are not the voices of victims. They are the learned voices of experts in their field. And I think if you stick to that, you will avoid abled saviorism or any kind of savior complex issues very easily. Here's another. This person here is trans, BIPOC, disabled activist, writer, all-round superhero, definitely a learned voice in their expert in their field person, called Leah Lakshmi Pepsner Samarasina, and they have written an amazing book called Care Work, Disability Justice, that embodies the idea that I've just mentioned about intersectional voices not being the voices of victims, and the kind of power and the love that is written in that book about disability and about disabled people. Yeah, it's an amazing book. So if you get a chance to read that, I would highly recommend it. I think everybody in the universe should read it. Yes. So on to less kind of emotional things. I won't linger on this slide long because it's not really kind of about empathy, but I think it's worth showing in terms of how creating with disability in mind is not just the right thing to do, but also economically viable. This graph shows a selection of different UK industries and their value. And the purple bar represents what's called the purple pound. And at £274.9 billion, it kind of dwarfs all these other major industries. This number is only increasing every year and will continue to do so even faster because we have an aging population. So yeah, if anyone says that it's not economically viable to design for disabled people, refer them back to the purple pound. Okay, so on to the workshop. Here are the little avatars. These little beings will become familiar to you over the next few hours. Well, on Tuesday. Unfortunately, due to the large numbers of you, I wasn't able to make you all one in physical form. I would have loved to, but they do exist as STL files, so you can all have one if you want. Just let me know and I'll email them over to you, and you can 3D print them yourselves, or perhaps, you know, hold on to them for later to use in the metaverse. But yeah, they're around. So what are the avatars representing and why are they there? They represent the essential complexities of this wicked problem that we call designing for disability. So how can we use empathy as a design tool? The first step is to understand the issue and the people you're designing for. And the way that works in this case is by distilling the bigger complex problem into essential complexities, the absolute elements of the issue, like all as important as each other, to visualize the issues as a spectrum. So this is my spectrum. Why can I create a spectrum? Another key aspect of this workshop from a production point of view is that the workshop is designed to be authored by anyone from an intersectional and underrepresented community. My spectrum is about disability because I'm a disabled woman, designer, blogger, mother, disability rights activist, who spent 5 years researching and living as a disabled person, 6 years nearly now. I have many friends who are disabled in many ways. I've worked with communities for years. I was a support worker for disabled people for 9 years. I follow countless disabled people on social media, etc. My life is just saturated with disability because I embrace it as not only who I am, but a culture and a movement that I'm part of. So this is all fed into my spectrum of empathy. And because all of that, it is very diverse, but it is always a perspective and a snapshot in time, which is really important to remember. My spectrum will change over time as my perspective shifts, and so does the world around it. So we need to be, you know, constantly kind of reevaluating how we see things and how we perceive things and how the world is. As the world changes, so do our feelings about them, whether they improve or get worse, or both. So yeah, how it's going to work on Tuesday is each team, they're going to be 9 teams for each one of the avatars. You'll be working together in breakout rooms that Gab is going to sort out. You'll receive your prompt cards for your specific avatar today, which is Friday, at the same time as a link to this video. And you'll be working together, and there'll be some tasks that will be teamwork, and then like the final task will be individual. And hopefully you can all, you'll all be researchers in your team. And I encourage everybody to take a different perspective on things. We'll be working with narratives and stories, so there's plenty of scope for opposing opinions, and really hope that we can get a kind of dynamic conversation going on and healthy discussion to produce some robust research. So yeah, task 1 and 2, just getting to know your avatar, exploring narratives and storytelling. So yeah, they're just kind of relaxing, fun exercises. It's more about kind of getting into the mind, the head state of being empathetic, and you'll become an advocate for your avatar. And hopefully it'll just be kind of nice, fun exercise to help us all kind of get relaxed and know what we're doing. So task 3, this is a contentious issue. Memes everywhere and not a drop to reference. What do I mean by that? So task 3 is about collecting research on your given place on the disability spectrum. Whilst it's fine to use charities, of course, and on your prompt cards, you'll have other places, good places to start where I've sent you over. And using blogs is amazing, because what we're trying to do is we're trying to find the real story that is existing now for the people who are affected by the things that you're researching. So blogs is amazing, but there is also a space in research, modern research, emergent research, for memes. It's a really kind of strong way where we all, and it's a strong, legitimate way where people communicate. Several of my conversations, are half memes, and I think it's a real kind of symbol of the times, and we could look at it like they're short poems, the modern haiku. So yeah, and often, I mean, I'm not saying that we need to use memes as legitimate, as parts of our dissertations, and we're not going to reference them because they're impossible to reference. But they definitely can be used at this point when you're just trying to find the lay of the land, and they'll give you ideas of what the real discourse is saying. And when then you can find other more reliable sources that act as a more rigorous research. Yeah, it's just they're really difficult to reference, but they're essential part of our modern way of communicating, and they will help you find things that you wouldn't have found before. So don't discount the memes. Okay, next, task 4 and 5 will be about critical empathy, I call. So we'll be using empathy to understand motives, understand territory, portable territory, and using our own lived experiences as a bridge of commonality together with the research that you've just done to create empathetic responses to these tasks, and working through ideas and discussing things. Yeah, and the final task will be a kind of takeaway task at home. Well, I'll just ask individuals if they have the time to reflect on what you found in the workshop and how you might integrate some of today's knowledge or practice or research methods into your current practice or future practice. I'd be really interested in hearing what people got from today. Yeah, especially as master's students. And yeah, So really interested to see where that comes from. If you have time, I would really appreciate it. And just the last slide to remind everyone about the imperfect resolutions. It's my tagline: designed for imperfect, emergent resolutions, not unattainable perfect solutions. So in my world, every design proposal should have a section where it discloses the part of it that are not inclusive, because that's where the future ideas can come from. And it brings that discussion to the table. You know, I feel like if we stop hiding and having to glamorize everything we do as perfect and say, right, we've got everything solved here, when clearly we don't exist in a world where that is possible, actually we can start producing much more interesting emergent design that allows for progress. Oh, sorry, coughed. Okay, I look forward to seeing you all on Tuesday.